All right, good morning. Once again, good to see everybody. Glad you're able to make it today. We're going to be picking up our study in Mark chapter 8. And how wonderful it is, with a crazy week like last week and everything going on, we just keep coming back to the Word. And it's the Word that gives us stability in life. It's the Word that helps us to just have some rhythm in our lives, something to come back to time and time again. When the weather's crazy, when you don't even know what tomorrow's going to look like, you can always go back to the Word, and the Word remains the same now and forever. And that's a wonderful thing that we have as a gift from God, His Word. Well, as mentioned, we're going to be in Mark chapter 8, and we're going to kind of transition a little bit at least in theme. Okay, so all the way back from chapter 3, there you had Jesus appointing the 12 apostles and saying, okay, you all are going to be my guys. You're going to be the ones that I'm going to designate specifically for the purpose of going out and proclaiming the good news of the gospel. They would have a unique role in the kingdom as the ones who were sent out personally by Christ. And as we continued on through the Gospel of Mark, we've seen this theme of lessons that they needed to learn as they served Christ and as they went out and proclaimed this message. So in the latter part of that chapter, in chapter 3, we saw that there was a lot of demonstrations of different responses that they would have from the crowds. In some cases, they would be very popular, so much so that the crowds would just be coming to them, as you saw at the beginning when Pentecost came and 3,000 were saved, and then 5,000 were saved, and then so many that you couldn't even count them. They were going to deal with popularity. They were going to deal with times when people who should have understood them the most would understand them the least, as Jesus did with his family. Then you had also times when they would be just out and out slandered. As the Pharisees said, he cast out demons by the ruler of the demons. So they needed to understand these different responses. But then when we got into chapter 4, we saw different parables by Christ to help them understand, okay, as you're going out and proclaiming the gospel, this is what the kingdom really is all about. And this is how it's all going to work out practically. And so we saw that take place. As he continued on, they came across these impossible situations at the end of chapter 4, going through chapter 5, at least 4 miracles in which the situation seemed hopeless and impossible, but God or Jesus showed them that even in impossible situations, I'm still king and I can still work. And so they needed to know that as they went out and served, that times are going to look bleak sometimes it's going to look impossible, but hey, Christ is still reigning. He's still going to do it. In chapter 6, we saw the limited commission. That's when they were sent out on that little journey there in the land of Galilee and Judea among the Jewish people. He said, go out into the house of Israel and proclaim the good news, cast out demons. They were healing people, anointing them with oil. That was an opportunity for them to get some real practical experience in proclaiming the gospel. And then chapter 7, some issues with tradition and not being ruled by tradition, but by the scriptures and having all that in a proper place. So all that is to say that for a very long time, what Jesus has been teaching his disciples is very practical things. Very boots on the ground. This is what you need to know. This is how you go about proclaiming the gospel. This is what you can expect while you're proclaiming the gospel. But as we get into chapter 8, we see a little bit of a shift. It's getting closer to Jesus' crucifixion. And so Jesus has got to turn up the heat, so to speak, or dig a little deeper and now deal with the apostles on a more fundamental level. And so now the theme from chapter 8, even going on into chapter 9, is going to be that of faith. Okay? It's one thing to know how to go about and do something, how to know practically how to do something, what to expect while you're doing that particular task. But it's a whole other thing to have a deep-rooted faith that will supply you what you need as you go out and do that service. And so here, Jesus' crucifixion is coming close. It could very well be, and it kind of was, a crisis moment for the disciples, a challenge to their faith as they see the one that they saw perform mighty and wonderful miracles hanging on a cross, dying the death of a criminal, wrongly accused. And now it's time to start focusing on their faith, getting their faith in line, empowering their faith, strengthening their faith as they move forward. So, in chapter 8, verses 1 through 10, we have the feeding of the 4,000s, where faith isn't directly spoken about, but it sets the stage for verses 11 on through the chapter and going into chapter 9, where the focus really is going to be on faith. And we're going to find that a proper faith is a faith that remembers past deeds of the Father and of Christ. True faith is a faith that understands, that can actually take what you've experienced, what you've learned, what you've seen God do, and bring understanding to it. But then also, faith is something that can be applied. You can apply your faith, and it's very necessary to get to that third step, that you don't just remember what God's done for you and understand what he's done and who he is, but to go out and live it out practically. And so we'll see all that as we go through chapter 8. So a very important chapter, not only for them, but for us as well. And one more note before we get into the chapter, we also have to remember who the audience is, original audience. Of course, we're all the audience when we read God's word, but the original audience, remember, was John Mark, a disciple of Peter, listening to Peter speak, but writing down the stories that Peter would have shared for the church in Rome during a time of persecution. It's kind of difficult to date the Gospel of Mark, but in all likelihood, it was during a time of immense persecution in the church. Probably around the time of Nero, it could have been. Again, scholars are mixed about that, but nonetheless, it seems to be written to a persecuted church. And so that's going to become important as we go through and really dig deep in this theme of faith. But anyways, let's go into chapter 8, and we'll look at this 4,000 miracle, or this feeding of the 4,000. It says, in those days when there was again a large crowd, and they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, I feel compassion for the people, because they have remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them will come, and some of them have come from a great distance. Very interesting study, and I'd encourage you to do this when you have extra time or you're at home. Compare the feeding of the 5,000 with the feeding of the 4,000 here. One of the main differences, or one of the first differences that you can see in the two, is the region in which these two events occur. The feeding of the 5,000 occurred kind of in Galilee, to a more Jewish crowd. Okay, here they're in the region of the Decapolis. If you look in chapter 7 and verse 31, you find that they're in this region of the Decapolis, which was east of Galilee, and it was a region of 10 cities. Deca, 10, Opolis cities, 10 cities, in which these 10 cities were primarily Gentile, although there were Jewish people there among them as well. And so in this particular feeding, there's a mixed crowd of Jews and Gentiles, which is significant because now you're getting a little bit of a glimpse of the mystery that Paul would talk about in Ephesians chapter 2 and 3. That is, that even the Gentiles will be included into the blessings of God. And it comes on the heels of chapter 7, where you had this idea of what's clean to eat, what's not clean to eat. And Peter, who would have been speaking on these things, and in the Gospel of Mark, we have that parenthetical statement where he says, therefore he pronounced all things clean. Who was the first person that realized that? It was Peter. Remember when he was on top of the house, he's getting hungry, it's getting to be about dinner time, and he has this vision of this sheep being lowered down with all these different creatures and animals. And he's told, Peter, rise up and eat. And Peter says, no, Lord, nothing unclean has ever touched my lips. He says, what I have called clean, you should not call unclean. And that was a pointer to the fact that now Gentiles were going to be included. That was in Acts chapter 10. And from that point on, or after that, the people from Cornelius' house, who was a Gentile, come asking for Peter. Peter goes, and the household is saved, and they receive the Holy Spirit and are baptized in Christ. So there's a correlation between all foods being clean and all people being clean. Because in the Jewish mind, up to that point, Gentiles were unclean. You don't go into their house. If you go into Gentile soil, before you go back into the covenantal land, you dust off the dust off your feet. That unclean Gentile land. Gentiles were unclean, but now all people are going to be clean. And that theme is found here as well. All foods are unclean, and now you have Jesus ministering to a mixed crowd of Jews and Gentiles, basically pointing to the fact that at one point, all Jews and Gentiles would be able to receive the blessings of God. But this is where he is. He's in the Decapolis. And he also has compassion on this crowd. So again, if you're comparing these two miracles, again in chapter 6 with the feeding of the 5,000, and then here with the feeding of the 4,000, in both cases he had compassion. There, it was a little bit different. He had compassion on the people because they were like a sheep without a shepherd. These Jewish people who should have been properly led and taught the things about God, who had the appropriate infrastructure with the synagogues and with these tiers of leaders and rabbis and Pharisees, they should have, of all people, been properly taught, properly led, should have been like sheep, being led by the shepherds who would guide them into the right way, the right relationship with God. But that's not what he found. They were like sheep without a shepherd. And so it immediately says after that he began to teach them. It's like, okay, there's a problem here. I have compassion on them because they're just not being taught. I'm going to teach them myself. And he goes and teaches them. Here, he has compassion on the crowd because they don't have anything to eat. And I love that. They've been with him for 3 days. And I highly doubt that people, when they were rushing out to see Jesus, they said, ooh, let me pack some Lunchables or something in my lunchbox as I go to. Probably not. They probably didn't have a whole lot of food with them. And then they've been with him for 3 days, and he looks on the crowd and says, boy, I feel sorry for him. I have compassion. I want to, help him out physically. So again, when you put these two together, you find Jesus has compassion with spiritual poverty, but also in physical poverty as well. When people aren't getting the Word of God, when they're not being fed the Word of God, when they're not being taught, when there's not proper leadership, Christ looks on that situation with compassion and says, I got to help these guys out. But then also when he sees a situation where people are physically malnourished or off, he has compassion. And he wants us to have compassion too, to go out and help them. We have a God who's concerned both with spiritual and physical needs. And it's very easy for us to focus on one or the other. To say, well, the physical doesn't really matter as long as people's spiritual needs are being met. Or to say, well, the spiritual doesn't matter so much because we want to focus on the physical because that's more practical. No, both take interest in Christ. And here he's fulfilling what he had previously said on the Sermon on the Mount, that if you seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, all these things will be supplied to you. In other words, don't worry about what shall we eat or what will we clothe ourselves with. He said, you will be supplied. And here he's making good on that promise. You guys are seeking the kingdom. You've been with me for 3 days. You've left everything that you had just to hear me speak and to see me perform these miracles. I'm going to make good on my promise. I'm going to feed you. You're going to have food to eat. You'll be provided for. And then in verse 4, and his disciples answered him, where will anyone be able to find enough bread here in this desolate place to satisfy these people? Now, to be fair with the disciples, there's two ways to interpret this. You could be generous to the disciples and say, well, on the positive side, they're saying they remember the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. And they're saying, you know what, we realize we can't do this, Lord. We saw you supply the people before. We can't go into this desolate land and provide bread, but implying, Lord, you can. You can do this miracle. That's being generous with them. But the other way you can look at it, and I think it falls more in line with the theme of this chapter, is that they've forgotten. They had forgotten what Jesus had done. with the feeding of the 5,000. Now, to their, to sympathize with them, there has been some time passing. If you're reading through the Gospel of Mark, it's only one page over, depending on how your Bible's laid out. And you think, well, didn't Jesus just feed the 5,000? Why are they having this challenge of faith? But remember, there was a lot of time that passed. They went up into the region of Phoenicia, where Tyre and Sidon was. They went way up north. They, dealt with the Syrophoenician woman, and then they traveled on down. There's been some time that has passed. So it's not like yesterday he fed the 5,000 and now they're challenged with this 4,000. Some time has passed, but they seem to have forgotten. There's a new challenge, a similar challenge, but it's new. It's in a different region, different situation, and they're challenged by faith. They're saying, well, how in the world are we going to feed all of these people? And so this is where, again, as I mentioned before, where faith isn't directly mentioned, but it's implied. And a good faith, a proper faith, is a faith that remembers. And maybe I'm not the only one who deals with this, but isn't it oftentimes the case that the Lord helps us time and time again? We come to Him in prayer, and He comes and meets our needs, maybe not in the way that we expected or the way that we had it planned out, but we look back and we say, yeah, the Lord was with me in this situation. If nothing else, He gave me strength to endure what I went through. And we can look back on our lives and see how many times He's come through for us. Oh, here's a new challenge. It might even be similar to what we experienced before, but it's a new challenge and it's in the present. And we become perplexed again. Oh, what am I going to do? How are we going to get through this hard time, this difficulty? And we have faith amnesia. We forget all the times He's been there for us before. And if we can't remember anything else, we can remember that Christ died for us. Remember Romans chapter 8? He who supplied His own Son, will He not freely give us all things? He showed His love for us through sending His Son to die for us. If nothing else, we can remember that and say, hey, He's for us today as well. The disciples should have done that, but again, they're challenged by faith. And this, I guess, initially seems like a bad thing, but this is a chance for Jesus to deal with them while He's with them, to help them in strengthening their faith. But He says in verse 5, and He was asking them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. And we'll find later down also a few small fish. Earlier in chapter 6, we had the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Here's 7 loaves and then a few small fish. Verse 6, he says, and He directed the people to sit down on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, He gave thanks and broke them, and started giving them to His disciples to serve to them, and they served them to all the people. They also had a few small fish, and after He had blessed them, He ordered these to be served as well. And they ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 7 large baskets full of what was left over of the broken pieces. All right, so very similar now. Now we're getting a little bit more similar instances here between this and the feeding of the 5,000. Kind of the same thing. They come to Jesus. Jesus gives them the bread. They go out and serve the people. Come back to Jesus. He gives them the bread. They take it out again. The disciples now getting this reinforced to them. Hey, don't be unbelieving. Don't forget the things that I've done for you. As I provided for you before, I will provide for you again. And that's, again, the challenge of faith, to remember that the Christ who supplied before will supply again. But as they go through and they're giving the people this bread, it says that they were satisfied. And our Jesus, our Lord, is one who satisfies. He's not there just to fill our bellies. He fills our souls, our hearts, our spirits. And we become completely satisfied in Christ. We have to remember that in a hurting world such as we face today, with pandemics, freezing temperatures, whatever the case may be, all the different craziness that's been going out there, we can get a bit distracted in thinking, well, in order to give people satisfaction, we got to give them comfort, pleasure, or supply these other exterior things, when really the only true person who can satisfy is Christ. We bring people to Christ, their deepest needs will be satisfied. And even oftentimes the exterior things become supplied as well. As they get plugged into a church family and we help each other out, the exterior things get helped, but internally we become fully satisfied. But it's more than that. There were 7 large basketful left over. They were satisfied to overflowing. Now you might think, wait a minute, here in the Decapolis, among this mixed crowd, he only gave them 7 baskets were left over. But, before, there were 12 baskets left over when he was in Galilee. Is this a disproportionate amount of supply that he's giving them? This is where it becomes very important to get out your Greek lexicon, get out your look at the original Greek. The New American Standard translators help us out here because they say large baskets full, whereas if you cross-reference the earlier, it just says full baskets. And that's true to the original. These are 2 different words for basket in the original. In chapter 6, with the feeding of the 5,000, the word implies just a basket, 12 baskets full. In this particular case, it's literally 7 large baskets full. Matter of fact, the word for basket here is a basket that's so big you could put a man inside of it. So it's not like, it's very much proportionate. So you have 12 smaller baskets, in chapter 6, but you have 7 large baskets in chapter 8 here that could have carried a man. So still an abundance of overflow by the Lord. And that's what we find in our lives. As we walk with Christ, as we just give our lives over to Christ, we lay ourselves down before him and we surrender to him wholeheartedly. He satisfies us and we think, wow, okay, I have the forgiveness of sins and eternal life. And usually that's where we stop. We think, okay, that'd be good enough, right? Just to have your sins forgiven and to have eternal life. But then as we dig deep into the scriptures and we just immerse ourselves in the Word of God, we begin to unearth these precious jewels and treasures and wonderful blessings that we have through Jesus Christ. And we realize that, wow, where once I thought I had enough, I find that I'm just overflowing with blessings. I am blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, as Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 3 says. I have the hope of the resurrection. I one day will inherit the earth and the new heavens and the new earth that God has prepared. I will live with him forever. He will tabernacle over me. There will be no need for a temple because he himself will dwell with me and I'll be in his direct presence forever. And you just keep digging and digging and you find out blessing after blessing after blessing. And you say, well, I was satisfied before, but now I got 7 baskets full of blessings around me. I just didn't know how much I had. That's how important it is to get into God's Word. Not just to know you're blessed, but to know how blessed you are in Jesus Christ. We all are. How blessed we are. We have a shepherd who anoints our head with oil, but also our cup overflows. It's one thing to have a full cup, but to have one just overflowing continuously. As John chapter 7 talks about, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me, and out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. You were thirsty before? I didn't just fill you up, so okay, I'm satisfied, but there's just rivers flowing out of me. I'm so blessed. And there he was referring to the Holy Spirit and the abundance of the Holy Spirit that would be supplied. But it's just wonderful, the God that we serve, the Christ that we serve. It says in verse 9, about 4,000 were there, and he sent them away. And immediately he entered the boat with his disciples and came to the district of Dalmanutha. Now, no one's really sure what this Dalmanutha is. Most likely it was on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. There's a little cave with the inscription Talmanutha. And some believe that that's the area. It was kind of in the southern part of the plains of Gennesaret right there. It's real close to Magadah, which we'll see in a moment. Kind of in that same area. But this is where they end up. So they've crossed back over again. Then in verse 11, so this kind of sets the stage for what we're about to read now. So if we've got it really in our heads about this feeding of the 4,000, now we're going to be able to continue on and understand, hopefully, what we're told later. So it says in verse 11, the Pharisees came out and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. So they're looking for a miracle from heaven. So maybe it could be that they've heard about this miracle, the feeding of the 4,000, maybe even heard about the 5,000. This sounds very much like Moses. Isn't this something Moses did when they were in the wilderness, supplied them with manna from the ground? We talked about that previously with the 5,000. But they began people are starting to question things. And the Pharisees, instead of saying, wow, there's something special about this man, there's something that we should grab a hold of and follow and really consider, they say, well, we want a sign from heaven. And, it's really easy. And here we go back, and here we're really hitting head on this idea of faith. It's real easy to feel justified in your lack of faith when you're seeking a sign. Because there's always a bigger sign God could give. There's always, well, if God will do this for me, then I'll believe. Or if I see this, then I'll believe. And that's a pretty common objective to the Christian faith. Well, if there is a God, why doesn't he write, there is a God up in the stars or something like that? And all that is just passing it off on God. Saying, well, the reason I don't have faith is because God didn't do something for me. And it's basically, in a sense, blaming God for your lack of belief. And that's kind of what the Pharisees are doing. Well, you fed these 5,000, but really show us a sign from heaven. That's what we want. We've seen these miracles on earth, but show us a sign from heaven, and a testing miracle that will really show us that you are who you say you are. And then in verse 12, it says, sighing deeply in his spirit. I wonder how many times maybe he sighs in his spirit with us, with the challenges that we have with faith. But he says, why does this generation seek for a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And leaving them, he again embarked and went away to the other side. So why are you seeking a sign? And keep in mind what sign he's talking about, an attesting miracle. I think sometimes this verse is misapplied to where a person who's trying to serve the Lord, know what direction the Lord wants them to go in their life, might pray, Lord, show me a sign where you want me to go. Open up the doors of opportunity in this particular area if this is where you want me to go. There's nothing wrong with seeking signs in the sense of just seeking direction from God. Some visible signposts to show me which direction I should go in life. That's not what's being talked about here. And those are legitimate. We should be asking for the Lord's direction and for him to guide us in our lives in a very practical way. What here is being talked about is seeking a sign, and a testing miracle is the literal translation of that word. And it's basically saying, I'm not going to believe you, God, unless you show me something. Unless you do this for me, I'm not going to believe. It's a faith issue more than a seeking guidance from God type of issue. But nonetheless, this is what they're looking for. So keep that in mind as we continue on in verse 14. And they had forgotten to take bread. That is, okay, so they're going on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and they've forgotten to take bread. I don't know how many times I've perhaps come home from work and forgot to stop and get bread. It's a bad feeling when you forget something. And by the way, have any of y'all tried to get bread recently? It's crazy trying to find bread. I went to Walmart and the bread aisle is just completely empty. So this kind of hits home with us right now as far as seeking bread. But that's their concern. We don't have any bread. We didn't bring bread. And he says, and did not have more than one loaf in the boat with them. Now keep in mind, a loaf isn't like rainbow bread like we think of a loaf. It's probably look more like a pizza without the toppings, more of a round type thing. But anyways, they had just one loaf in the boat with them, and he was giving orders to them saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. So he says something about leaven. Oh, leaven, bread, okay. Here, what he's trying to tell them is beware of this attitude that we just saw in the previous verses. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. We find in Matthew, he get a little bit more detail, the teaching of the Pharisees, but this whole idea of needing attesting signs all the time, always seeking a miracle. If the disciples were going into the far reaches of the earth to proclaim the gospel and they needed a sign every single time, they needed a boister of faith, they weren't going to succeed. Don't always look for these signs. Just believe. Go off of what you've seen before. That should be enough for you to now move ahead and to continue to walk in faith. So beware of that. Don't get caught up in that. That is contagious. It's like leaven that can just take over the whole loaf of bread. And if you don't believe how fast that can happen, remember what happened to the Israelites in the wilderness. It only took a handful of spies coming back from the land saying, "Nah, it can't be done. We're like grasshoppers before them. We can't take it." And millions of people. That disbelief was like an infection that went through the whole congregation there. Millions of people then didn't believe because what a handful of people said. And that's what can happen if these disciples began to listen to these Pharisees. Show me a testing sign. Blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. That can be extremely dangerous. In verse 16, they began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread. So here Jesus is giving them this profound message about leaven and this warning against disbelief, and all they're thinking about is bread. So hopefully no one here listening to the message is just thinking about lunch. But although I'm sure that happens sometimes, especially when you start getting hungry. But, they're thinking about bread. And that's where their mind has been. We got a long ways to go. We don't know what we're going to encounter going across the sea, and all we got is this loaf of bread, blah, 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 blah. Their minds are racing. And Jesus says something about leaven. Oh no, he's getting on to us because we don't have any bread. Verse 17, and Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you discuss the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet see or understand? Do you have a hardened heart? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of broken pieces you picked up?" And they said to him, 12. "When I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of broken pieces did you pick up?" And they said to him, 7. And he was saying to them, "Do you not yet understand?" You got 2 eyes here, and you got 2 ears here, and they're not working for you. You're seeing these miracles. You're seeing what I'm doing. You know that bread's not a problem for me. I've got that covered. I could fill this boat with bread if we wanted to, with just this one loaf. That's not a problem. Do you not understand? So here we come to the second point. A proper faith is a faith that remembers, and that's even brought up in these verses too. But to take it a step further, it's a faith that understands, that can remember what Christ has done, can process that, can mull it over, chew the cud, so to speak, and mull it over and realize, okay, this is something I now have gained an understanding with Christ. That's what the disciples should have done. When they saw the thousands being fed, they should have processed it and say, okay, Christ has got the bread thing covered. Now I need to be focused on the spiritual matters. And then had they realized that, they wouldn't have been thinking about the bread. Oh, we only have 1 loaf? That's no problem. Let's listen to what Jesus has to say. Let's take in the spiritual teaching that he's given us. But this lack of faith kind of put a damper on their understanding. And I wonder, in our challenges to understand scriptures, is it really because the scriptures are hard to understand? Or is there a faith issue underneath? I can't mean that. Surely it doesn't mean that. That's too good to be true. Or that's not how I always looked at it. Or that sometimes really understanding scriptures is just saying, Lord, whatever your word says, I'm going to believe it. And I've seen how in these other portions of scriptures, how you were faithful and how these things came true. These other portions, maybe I don't completely understand them, but I'm going to take them by faith. Sometimes we don't believe something because we don't understand it. But the reason we don't understand it is because we don't believe it. Sometimes we got to reverse it. Sometimes we think we got to understand, then I'll believe. But sometimes it's just take it by faith, then the understanding will follow after. Very important. Then verse 22, and they came to Bethsaida. Very interesting. Who was from Bethsaida? Philip, Andrew, and Peter. Now, at this particular point in time, they're living in Capernaum. Remember, they were on the, or I guess they were born or raised on the eastern side of Galilee in Bethsaida, but then they traveled west into Capernaum and were living there at that point. But I think this little detail is brought in there because we're going to zero in on something about the disciples to show Jesus did something in their hometown, and therefore this miracle applies to them. Because this healing of the blind man, I'm sure he healed a lot of blind people, but this one specifically mentioned. But anyways, it says, and they brought a blind man to Jesus and implored him to touch him. Taking the blind man by the hand, he brought him out of the village, and after spitting on his eyes and laying his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see a man, for I see men, for I see them like trees walking around. Then again he laid his hands on his eyes, and he looked intently and was restored, and began to see everything clearly. And he said to him, or sent him to his home, saying, do not even enter the village. So wonderful, marvelous, great, and wonderful miracle performed. But isn't it placed in an awkward position? And isn't it also kind of strange the way it took place? So all of a sudden we're dealing with the disciples, we're dealing with faith, we're talking about all these things that are happening to the disciples, the things they're hearing and experiencing, and then all of a sudden we're given this miracle. And not only that, it's a miracle that's real peculiar because Jesus doesn't heal him right away. He just heals him a little bit to where he can kind of see, kind of like maybe those who need glasses, you don't have your contacts in, everything's kind of blurry, or you don't have your glasses on, everything's blurry. He just was able to see a little bit, but then Jesus touches him again and then he's able to see fully. Well, this fits just perfectly. This seamlessly fits with what we're talking about, especially when you tie this idea of being able to see with being able to understand, which is a common theme throughout all the scriptures. Having eyes, do you not understand? Or seeing, do you not understand? This correlation between the two. And what this is really showing is that this was the condition of the disciples. As they came to Christ, he personally touched them. He personally was living with them, walking among them, teaching them, physically present with them, just as he was with this blind man. But at this point, they're only seeing things blurred. They're getting a glimpse. They're kind of understanding what Christ is all about. We're going to see them even recognize him as Christ. But they don't really get the full picture. And so it's kind of like a camera that hasn't been brought into focus yet. They're getting these bits and pieces. Their faith is beginning to understand some things, but they don't have the full understanding. Well, the more and more they stay with Christ, the more and more they're touched by Christ, the more clear their understanding will be. And they'll be like this blind man who, maybe it took contacting him twice to get the full vision. They're going to get the full vision eventually. It's going to come about. And that's what we have to do as well. Yeah, there's probably a lot of things we don't understand in the scriptures. There's probably a lot of things we're a little hazy about, things we're not really sure about. But what we need to do is not get frustrated and say, well, if I had a relationship with Christ and Christ was helping me, I'd understand everything. Just keep coming back to Christ. Let him touch you today. Let him touch you tomorrow. Contact him on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just keep coming back to the Word. Keep coming back to him in prayer. Having an open heart, a believing heart to receive what he's teaching. And eventually that blurry vision that you have will become clearer and clearer and clearer, even if it's in stages. Don't give up just because you don't understand something. Just keep coming back. Too many people have fallen from the faith because the first challenge to their faith they come across, they say, oh, well, everything I believe just became unraveled, and they walk away. Don't just take the first thing, because for every argument, there's a counter argument. And for every, challenge to our faith, there's a really good explanation for that challenge. But we just got to keep staying engaged and keep clinging to Christ. Stay true to the spiritual disciplines of prayer, scripture reading, worship. It's when we get away from those things and then we begin to listen to other things over here that we get pulled away. Just keep contacting Christ. You don't understand it today, just keep coming back. Eventually your vision will clear up and you'll see more clearly these things. So this is the challenge of the disciples. Hey, I want to bring you from this blurry vision to a more clear vision. That's what he's going to do here as we conclude the chapter. In verse 27, Jesus went out along with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he questioned his disciples, saying to them, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, saying, "John the Baptist." Remember, Herod thought that. "John the Baptist," and others say Elijah, but others one of the prophets. And he continued by questioning them, but who do you say that I am? What's your vision like? Let me give you a vision test. You know, what are you seeing right now when you look at me? Peter answered and said to them, or to him, you are the Christ. And he warned them to tell no one about him. Hey, wonderful proclamation. Just a great example of Peter in being able to understand the vocation of Christ, the title of Christ, who he was. And by the way, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus rarely ever talks about the Christ. Only 3 times does he even mention Christ. And all of them, he's not really talking about himself, except for in chapter 9. He could be implied that he's talking about himself, but he's not one who's saying, I'm the Christ, because that was a packaged word. So if he went around telling everybody, I'm the Christ, they would be thinking in a social, political, okay, David was the anointed one. Messiah just means anointed one. Christ means anointed one. He's the anointed one. Let's make him king. They were already trying to do that. And that was a packaged word, so he kind of avoided it. But despite that, still Peter recognized it. He said, you know what? You're the Christ. You're the anointed one. You're the Messiah. So he's got some vision, Peter does. Yeah, he can see men as trees. He can see Christ, or Jesus, as Christ. But it hasn't come into focus yet, and that becomes clear as we continue on. In verse 31, he began to teach them. Oh, by the way he's going to clarify this is 2 things. He's going to say, yes, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Christ. But he's going to show them what that means for himself, and then what that means for them. Okay, so he's going to clear some things up. Verse 31, he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Okay, you believe I'm the Messiah, the anointed one by God, connected to David, who was also the anointed of God. This is what it means. You might think that means I'm going to take up my throne in Jerusalem. I'm going to become king. I'm going to sit in the seat of David in his place in a very physical and political and nationalistic way. Now, this is what it means. I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die. I'm going to be handed over to the religious leaders. They're going to condemn me to death, and I'm going to die. But I'll be raised again on the 3rd day. It's interesting how the disciples always were challenged with that last statement. And they always tended to focus on the first part. Not so much on the resurrection, but on the sufferings that he's going to endure, because that's what was most challenging to them. And Peter shows that his vision is a little blurry. Yeah, you're the Messiah, but you're not that type of Messiah. Is basically what he says. It picks up in verse 32. And he was stating the matter plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. So he's saying, no, Lord. And we find this in other parallel passages where he says, no, Lord, forbid it. This should never be. You shouldn't be crucified. You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. He says in verse 33, but turning around and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's. So in other words, you know me as the Messiah, but you've already got your mind made up what that means and what you want that to mean. And why are you really following me, Peter? Maybe he's being challenged with. Because you think I'm going to become this king and you can sit at my right hand and we'll have an easygoing life from that point on? What are you really getting at, Peter? Are you seeking man's interest? Are you just concerned about what you want the Messiah to be about? Or are you concerned about what God's ultimate plan is? Jesus is who he is. He's not who we want him to be. And that becomes very important. Because we can paint pictures of Jesus and say, we can paint portraits of Jesus and say, this is what my Jesus looks like. My Jesus wouldn't do that. My Jesus would do this. No, it's not important what your Jesus would do. What would the real Jesus do? What is he really like? And that's what Jesus is trying to get Peter to understand. You've got this picture painted in your head of who you think I am and what I will do, but it's going to look a lot different for you. Yes, I will be exalted. Of course, I'm adding in information here, but he would be exalted. He would be glorified, but it'd be in a different way than what they were expecting. In verse 34, and he summoned the crowd with his disciples. So his disciples now, hey, bring all the crowds together, because this could be a misunderstanding that everybody's having. Let's get this straight. Let's get this corrected, this false assumption. And to get into the mindset of the people. Think about it. They've seen him do miracles. They've been chasing after him. In Mark, you see Jesus going everywhere. And the people are just following him everywhere he went. And they're seeing miracles, and he's teaching with authority. And they're thinking, yeah, this is the answer to all my problems. If I can get connected to this guy, I'll never be sick. I'll never have problems. Life will be great. I'll live a life of comfort and pleasure and joy. And everything's going to be rose petals and butterflies. But Jesus is saying, no, come on, crowds, get together. I'm going to show you what it really means to follow me. It's not so much about fixing all your problems in the way that you expect. He says, and then it continues on, and said to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Following me is not about you so much as it is about being dedicated to me and committed to me. You got to deny yourself. Put yourself aside for a second. That's very hard for us to do, especially as Americans, right? Put yourself aside for a second. Deny yourself how you want things to progress, how you want things to work out. Take up your cross. Put yourself to death. Verse 35, for whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Jesus, as he went through the whole region, all these different regions, Phoenicia, the Decapolis, Galilee, Judea, all these different places, what was he doing? Saving life, saving people's lives. But now he's saying, you know what? I've been saving your lives. I've been healing you of these diseases. But at the same time, you need to be willing to give up your life for my sake. This would be very important to a persecuted church, as we've mentioned before with the original audience. They needed to understand what true discipleship meant, and we do as well. Verse 36, for what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? So you can't give up anything more. There's nothing more precious than a person's soul, right? Because that's the part that will continue on. Even after the body has died, of course it will be resurrected. The body is important. We don't want to get into dualism and things like that, but it is important. But the value that the soul has is a lot more important than laying down your body. You're going to die eventually anyways. Lay down your life and you'll have it restored again. He says, there's this exchange that's taking place. So typically what you want to do is you want to exchange something of less value for something of greater value. And I've just recently bought a little point A to point B car. It's a little nicer than my other car was. But I exchanged my old car for that car. It wasn't an equal trade, but my other car, the bumper was hanging down on it. It's missing the handle on the driver's side door. You had to crawl on the inside to open up the latch on the back. When it was driving, it was making these loud noises. I'm not a mechanic, so I'm like, what in the world is going on with this car? I knew I was about to have to invest a lot. It had 212,000 miles on it, and I said, well, I need to exchange it for a better car. I need something better. How silly of me would it have been if I had taken that car and traded it in for a worse car? So, well, that's what we do sometimes. We exchange the greater things for the lesser. In Romans chapter 1, he talks about they exchange the true God for mere creatures, for idols and things in the form of creatures and the things of the earth. And matter of fact, I'm getting off, but in Romans chapter 1, if you follow this exchange idea, Paul is using that all the way through that whole section. They exchange the truth for a lie. They exchange the creator for the created, all these different things. But that's where we begin to get off when we're exchanging the greater things for the lesser. The greater thing is eternal life through Jesus Christ and the abundant blessings he can rain on you if you'll just lay down your life, which you're going to die anyways. So that's a great exchange. And to lay down not only just your physical life, also this word in the original language goes back to the psyche, the soul. It could also be talking about someone's mental life as well. But just laying down this idea of having things my way, denying yourself. Anyways, he says, verse 38, for whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So you don't want to stand up for me, you don't want to proclaim me, you're ashamed of me, then why would I then stand before my Father and basically proclaim you or speak for you? He said, if you're ashamed of me, I'm going to be ashamed of you. Again, it's kind of the same thing with the forgiveness thing, right? If you want God to forgive you, the natural assumption is that you must forgive others. He said, if you don't forgive others their trespasses, your Heavenly Father will not forgive you your trespasses. There's a correlation. And if you won't proclaim that I am the Messiah, even though you'll be ridiculed for it, and you're ashamed of me, then I'll be ashamed of you in heaven before my Father. We gotta be bold, and we gotta be not ashamed to speak about Christ. To wear the name of Christ is the most precious thing we have, and we should wear it like a badge and be proud of it, even if it causes hardship and difficulty. So as we kind of review back on chapter 8, we see that faith is in the forefront now. These guys needed to understand they needed a faith that remembered the past things that Christ had done for them and be able to bring that knowledge into the present, to take and formulate and kind of mull over what they've seen to bring them into a clearer understanding. But then they also needed a faith that is applied, a faith that says, you know what, based on what I believe, this is what my life should look like. It's a life of denial, taking up my cross and following Christ, giving my all for him because I found something better. I found something greater. I found the one who can truly satisfy. So if there's anyone here this morning who would like to give their life to this Christ, who have said, you know what, I've had some challenges in my faith, but I'm ready to step out. I'm ready to really embark on this journey that's set before me, to follow Christ, to deny all, and to give my all for him, because I know that's a good exchange. I know I'll be getting something better for my return. I'll be getting a better return for what I'm giving up. If you would like to do that, if you'd like to give your life to Christ, whether you're here, if you're online, you can contact us. Again, we offer up baptisms 24/7. Just contact us in some way. We would love to help facilitate that. But whatever your needs are, please come forward as we stand and sing the song that JT has prepared.